Are we live?
Yeah, looks like it.
All right. Let me just check. All right. All right. Well, I apologize to everybody waiting online for us that we were a little bit late. You know, we're still getting used to using this new technology, but I'm glad you're able to join us for our forum. I just want to start by acknowledging some of the pain and stress in our community that we've been experiencing the past couple of weeks. It's a time when it's important to listen, to respect one another, and reflect on how we can do things better in our community and in our schools. This week is the last week of school in the Berryessa School District. Students are heading into a very uncertain summer break. It was March 13th when students and families heard the shocking news that schools would shut down for a few weeks. And we didn't know at that time that that day, March 13th, was actually the last time they would attend school in person this year. Our teachers and staff and administrators around the county have worked very hard to provide a form of ongoing education for students. And schools have focused on making sure families in need are served meals, that technology was made available for families, and that mental health services have been provided given the added anxiety these times are causing for our students. So I was planning to take the opportunity of the last week of school to discuss the current thinking for the coming school year with our community. And I was thinking about how I could make that conversation interesting, especially given that there's so many unknowns that still exist and we're not really sure how the beginning of the school year is going to look yet. So I thought it might be better to hear from a couple of our students about their experiences with distance learning and actually ask them for their recommendations for going forward, given these different times. So I'm excited to be joined today by two students. One is Chao Chi. He's finishing 8th grade at Sierra Mont Middle School and will be a freshman at Independence High School in the fall. Chao Chi, I had looked forward to shaking your hand at the promotion tomorrow afternoon, but we will be doing that virtually, as you know. And our other student is Dima. She is going to be entering her senior year in the fall at Piedmont Hills High School. So thanks both of you for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your experiences, and we'll get started with some questions that I have for you. I think it was probably almost a couple months ago now, Chao Chi, when you and your friends wrote an email to our school district and to your school administration with your thoughts and thoughts of some of your friends about what you were missing by this experience and how things were unfolding for the school year. So can you tell us a little bit about the feelings that you expressed in that letter and what you think, what you and your friends feel like you're missing, and you know, some of your thoughts about the way that we had to change school for you?
So when school was closed for the rest of the school year, we felt really empty, and a lot of students are missing the social interaction they needed, and students are limited in group work and group discussion. Um, Social interaction is really important because it helps students learn from each other and get and understand each other's different perspectives.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's really hard to replicate that when you're not in school every day. So Dima, what about you? What's your experience been like? What have you missed about in-person school and how have things changed for you?
Online schooling is good. Well, it was better at first because after like weeks of not putting in any like education into our brains, we started to feel like we weren't being productive and we were losing everything we learned. So at first it was good to like be able to see our teachers again. But then online, there's less participation and a lot of people turn off their cameras, so it's harder to stay engaged. And because a lot of it was review, it also made it harder to stay engaged.
Okay. Um, for both questions for both of you, how much contact did you end up having with your teachers once you were doing online learning, and how did that contact? What did it look like? And I know it'll be different for each of your teachers and for each of you, but tell me a little bit about the kinds of contact you had with your teachers once you were doing distance learning. Chao Chi, you want to go first?
Sure. For me, I emailed my teachers once a week or so, to check up on them. And we had Zoom meetings. For some of my teachers, we had Zoom meetings once a week. And for the rest of the classes, we either barely met or we just don't meet at all.
Mm. And when they had Zoom meetings, what kind of participation did you have from students in the class?
So we mainly, the teacher made it more relaxing so we can so we're not that stressed. And the teacher talked about what we're going to learn about, and we just kind of chatted.
So it was a once a week kind of check-in with those teachers?
Yes.
And then you had work that was given to you to do on your own between the 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. How about you, Dima? What was your schedule like?
It's similar. We had 2 classes a day, unless you have early schedule, but generally 2 classes a day, 3 days a week. And so you would meet with your teacher for 90 minutes, and their emails were always open. They also had office hours, which is like, I think, an hour where they are on Zoom for anyone that needs to go. I never personally had to go, except once before AP exams to review, but they always like offered extra help and they were always open to that. And even our social worker would send emails through like School Loop and Loop News, so we would have access to that as well.
Okay, so that's good. And that was going to be my next question is, if you needed additional help outside of that 90-minute window or outside of the window, Chachi, you had in your middle school classes, were teachers available to ask questions, and were they there for you? And I guess, Dima, you've kind of already answered that question. Chachi, you said you sent emails to teachers, so they were accessible and able to answer questions on the work you were doing?
Yes.
Okay. What classes, I know you all, because you're in middle and high school, you have, I think, 6 different classes that you usually would attend every day. What kinds of classes worked well, do you think, in this environment, and which ones didn't work as well? I guess.
So the ones that worked like really well was the math, language arts, history, science, and the ones that didn't really work out was the elective classes and PE.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Dima?
It's similar. I feel like world language was a little hard because world language, you kind of need to practice it in person with the teacher.
Mm.
You don't know the answers, and it's not like you can search them up because the internet is very, like, it has so many different answers. So that didn't really work as well. And then also lecturing got a little boring too. So yeah.
So it's harder to watch a lecture when you're staring at a computer screen than if you're there in person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously both of you had electives beyond the core classes. Those electives are much harder there. You tend to be hands-on. Are you both in music or in performance of some kind? Or
My only elective is Spanish because I have physics.
okay. But Chachi, you were pointing out that music and PE were really hard to do, obviously, once you were no longer there in person.
Yes.
Did you still meet with those teachers regularly to talk about what was going on?
I only met with my music teacher.
Okay. All right. What kind of interaction were you able to continue to have with your peers? Did you have one-on-one interaction? Were there any more small group activities that you were doing? How did that work out?
So we barely had any social interaction. For math, last time we did do a group work on decimals. So that worked pretty well.
But you didn't really have it. You would normally in class have been doing breakout groups and things to work in small sessions with your teachers, or with your peers, but you couldn't really do that now. They didn't assign projects like that, right?
Yes.
Okay. How about you, Dimo? Did they have anything like that for you?
They did, but it was minimal. They had breakout rooms. And again, the camera thing made it a little hard. If the students had it off, then you wouldn't know if they're listening to you or if they're.
So did you still have, is that mainly to discuss what your lessons were, or did you also have projects that you had to do as a group?
Oh, we didn't have any projects, but we did, like, our teacher would assign different, for example, my English teacher, she would assign a different prompt to each group and we would have to analyze it together so we could present it to the class.
And how was communication from your school and from your teachers during this time? Yeah, go ahead.
It was good. I think it was effective.
so they were able to regularly communicate. How about Chachi? Did you feel like you got enough communication from your teachers and from the school?
Yes, it's like I got all the details I needed.
So what other kinds of communication do you think would have been beneficial given the change in education that you experienced? Anything different? No, everything you feel like you got enough.
I don't know if this is addressing the question exactly, but I know one of my teachers required participation points, and that made the class participate, and I felt like that was more effective. So if like other people do that, that could also work better in online learning.
Right. And your school district, and I'm just gonna ask you your opinion on this, Dima, because there was a debate in this county about how to grade people's work and how to how to evaluate whether students were learning the curriculum. And so some school districts went to a pass-fail, and your school district continued to give grades, as far as I know, right?
Yeah, we had a baseline grade March 13, which I understand was to like minimize the stress that we feel during this time, especially if some people are impacted heavily than others. But at the same time, that baseline grade made a lot of people stop trying, and like because they were okay with that grade, they didn't take learning seriously. So although it did help to improve our grades a lot of people also slacked more because of it.
So you think that some people just disengaged at that point and probably didn't get much out of the rest of the school year? And Chachi, you were doing pass-fail. How do you think that affected the way you were learning in your classes?
So in my perspective, a lot of classmates just did like 60% of the assignments and didn't do the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really effective, and students can get lazy and like, not do it.
Okay, I think your video froze for a second, so we'll move on. Dima, did you have interaction with counselors during this time? I mean, normally you would be talking about, doing college counseling or some other things that.
Sorry, my.
Yeah, that's okay. Chachi will. Normally you'd be having contact with counselors during this time of year, especially in your junior year of high school. Did they continue to work with you?
Less personally. I know that if I emailed them, they probably would have responded, but they did continue to send like informative emails. They even compiled a video about the college app process and everything, and they posted it on YouTube. So like even the presentations that they would have at school, they're available online.
Okay. And there's been a lot of uncertainty about school, about your future, about next year. How does that uncertainty make you feel? Has there been any? I mean, do you think that there's been added stress to your lifestyle right now as a result of these changes?
Yeah, let him answer first.
I don't know if Chachi, if you heard the whole question, because I know you came and went, but for either of you, do you have any thoughts about your feelings during this time, how you're feeling managing the stress of COVID-19 and everything else that's going on? And have there been any, anything you want to express, I guess is my question, if you feel comfortable expressing it.
For me, it feels like a normal summer break because I get to write my thoughts and feelings into a journal, so like I can like release my stress and pressure.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
I also haven't been particularly stressed, but the uncertainty is annoying because I don't know what I'm doing. Like, is it going to waste? Is it going to benefit me? And a lot of the college application things are changing, like the requirements, the testing requirements are changing. So I don't know if I should try to take subject tests or if I should just not, stuff like that.
Right. And you brought up the journal. That's a good thing, Chachi, to have at a time like this. And you'll probably look back, even though these were difficult times, and want to remember how this all made you feel. And it'll be nice to have some record of this, because this is certainly some history that we're living through that you will remember forever. And then, I think it's just important to mention that our schools have provided and made sure that there was available mental health care for students and families during this time, because a lot of people do feel some extra anxiety and stress, and we want to make sure that that people are taken care of. So Dima, you mentioned that you were getting messages from, was it the social worker at your school? So what kind of messages were they sending?
They were acknowledging like the unease that people could be feeling and like telling them that it's okay, it's not abnormal, it's like it's completely fine, and if you need to talk about it, they're there for them.
Okay.
It was just supportive. It was nice to read.
And Xiaoqi, did you get any kind of communication directly from the school along those lines about whether you needed extra services or how students might be feeling?
For Miss Arlene, I think she made a website for students to like not get too stressed out during quarantine. So then like she had some PDFs you can print out and do, so which helps a lot not getting stressed out.
Good. Yeah, that's important. I wanted to mention to anybody who might be watching this live on Facebook, if you have any questions for the students or things you'd like to ask, you can go ahead and type them into the chat window there, and Jonathan will let me know if anybody posts anything, and then we can bring those up before we end the discussion. So, there's been a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations with the school districts, with the various school boards, and meetings across the county between different school districts talking to each other about what is going to happen in the fall. What will the health conditions allow us to do, and what will be safe for students, and what's the best way to continue your education. We're hoping that we'll be able to get you back in school, but there's a chance that you'll have some kind of hybrid system where you're in school some of the time and have to work from home some of the time, or that there will be periods of time where you have to work the way you've been working. And so I wanted to ask each of you, what kinds of changes would you like to see, or improvements do you think would be helpful so that distance learning and learning from home will be effective for you?
In my opinion, I think I suggest more interaction between the students and the teachers, so that the students can be more engaged, and more meetings like once or twice a week per class.
More frequent communication directly with your teachers.
Yes. And I also recommend more paperwork than digital work, because like keep on staring on the screen is like bad for your eyes.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've had that conversation, I remember, among school board members just a couple weeks ago about there's a big difference sitting in school for 6 hours versus sitting in front of a computer for 6 hours. And definitely it's not the same, and not necessarily the best for, for everybody to be using a computer so much. Adima, you have some thoughts on that?
I also agree on more student participation if they can turn on their cameras. I understand some people can't, but like if they can, or they can turn on their mics too, that would also help.
Okay, so it's more of a question of how the school engages more of the students in the class discussions. Okay. Any final thoughts either of you have about what you feel during this time, what you've been missing, what input you have for your schools that you'd like to express?
I feel like if we do continue distant learning in the fall, then I would suggest teachers to slow down the pace a little so students can catch up and have a full understanding on the topic.
Okay.
I agree. A lot of it was review, so there has to be like a compensation for that. But other than that, like I feel like our school district has been doing well in the resources they've been providing.
Yeah, that's good. And I know you were in a position, I think you mentioned this before, that because there was a shutdown and it was expected to only last a couple weeks, the district wasn't planning to do distance learning online and was waiting to bring you back to the classroom. So you did have a lag period where you weren't engaged at all, and then you had to sort of figure out how to ramp back up. And that was probably true for most districts because it was so new and everybody had to figure out how to change the way they taught. So, obviously this wouldn't be the same in starting a new school year if we had to start in these conditions. Jonathan, are there any questions or comments online that you'd like to share?
No questions that I can see, but a question that I have for both of you. So how has it been taking tests? I mean, how do teachers really monitor that? Isn't it easy for people to cheat? I'm not really sure how that whole process has worked for you guys, just test taking.
So for my science teacher, only my science teachers have given tests, and she let us use open book, like any resources you have, but just no open people. Like you can't ask anyone about it. So it's basically open book.
And Dima, how about you? How did they do high school testing in your environment?
That's another, I think, flaw with this system because of the baseline grades. We didn't have finals either, and none of my teachers tested us. But we did have AP exams, so I found that my AP classes were more dedicated in like persisting with online learning so that we could pass the exam. And the exams were also open book and open resource, but you can't talk to anyone.
Right, and and I know the College Board who administers the AP test had some very strict protocols about what you could be doing on your computer to make sure that you weren't actually cheating, and they had some pretty sophisticated ways to monitor that kind of behavior. Yeah, I had heard from other students in high school that the only classes that were really fully moving forward as rigorously as before were those AP classes, because the AP test was coming and you couldn't afford to let up. So you didn't have finals in any of your classes other than that? Okay. And you didn't have other exams during that time? It was just classwork and making sure that you were understanding the material?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so obviously, Jonathan, that's an interesting question for going forward, and how a full school year might operate in that manner.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is great. This is a great conversation, interesting discussion. It was really nice to hear your input. Both of you are either current or former students of our school, Berryessa School District, but also local residents here in District 4 and Berryessa area. And this is going to be an important discussion going forward, is how do we make sure that schools are prepared for any possibility. And even if we start in person next year, there might be periods of time where, because of health conditions, you have to go home and work from home for a while. So this was kind of a practice run to be sure that we're ready for that going forward. I'm continuing to solicit input from students, families, and staff as we make plans for the following school year. Obviously, our school district is always open for input. I think all school districts are. There's been some surveys out there for parents and staff and students to give their input so that we can plan appropriately for the new school year. There's also opportunity that I'm going to look into about how we can get more information from our elementary school kids. This was a good discussion with middle and high school, but elementary school has a much different experience with distance learning, and there's a whole lot of other considerations for really the youngest kids, especially kindergarten, first grade, second graders who, really need to build on social behavior in addition to learning basic skills. So, there'll be some questions. It's even harder to effectively administer distance learning for those youngest students. So there'll be some conversations we'll have in that regard as well. And I'm hoping we can have more of these kinds of discussions over the summer. So thank you, Chao Chi. Thank you, Dima, for joining me. And now that summer's here, enjoy your summer and be ready for the fall. And congratulations on finishing middle school, Chao Chi. I know you missed the formality of the end of the year, but it's great that you'll be a high school student in the fall, and you'll certainly be a great asset to Independence High School, and we'll miss you in Berryessa.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.